April 8th, 1943. High above the war-torn landscapes of Caen, France, at a dizzying 27,000 feet, Oberleutnant Ralph Hermichen's oxygen mask could barely conceal the smirk playing on his lips. A veteran ace of Jagdgeschwader 26, with the grim tally of 26 victories etched into his consciousness, he watched with detached amusement as ungainly silhouettes clawed their way laboriously towards his formation. Through the pristine canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190A5, the American fighters, making their combat debut over occupied Europe, appeared almost comical. "The enemy has sent us flying milk bottles," he transmitted to his wingman, a chuckle escaping him as he observed the massive Republic P-47 Thunderbolts struggling for altitude, their powerful engines straining against their immense weight. To German pilots, accustomed to the elegant lines of the Spitfire or the nimble agility of Soviet machines, these corpulent American aircraft were a source of easy derision. Barrel-shaped fuselages, greenhouse canopies, wings that seemed too small for their bulk, propellers that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe's inventory. They were a joke, a clumsy pretender to the skies. What Hermchen, and indeed none of the German pilots circling like confident wolves above, could possibly have known, was that they were not merely witnessing a clumsy debut. They were observing the silent, terrifying arrival of the weapon that would systematically dismantle the Luftwaffe's fighter arm, transforming from an object of ridicule into an instrument of terror, its thunderous roar becoming the most feared sound in the German skies. This is the story of how a perceived weakness became an overwhelming strength, how laughter turned to terror, and how the very definition of aerial warfare was irrevocably rewritten by a machine they called the flying milk bottle. By April 1943, the skies over occupied Europe were a familiar hunting ground for the Luftwaffe. For nearly 4 years, German fighter pilots had dominated, their skills honed in the brutal crucible of campaigns across Poland, France, Britain, and the vast Eastern Front. Aces like Ralph Hermchen, with their impressive kill tallies, were not just skilled aviators. They were veterans of a continuous, unforgiving war, their tactics refined, their machines proven. Their Messerschmitt Bf 109 seconds and Focke-Wulf 190 seconds were the epitome of German engineering and aerial combat philosophy. Lightweight, agile interceptors, optimized for rapid climbs, tight turns, and devastating, short-burst attacks. They believed implicitly in the supremacy of maneuverability and pilot skill, a doctrine forged in the early victories of the Blitzkrieg and reinforced by their encounters with British and Soviet fighters. Into this arena of seasoned predators stepped the untested American forces, many of their pilots fresh from training, with precisely 0 days of combat experience. And their primary weapon, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, was, to German eyes, an anomaly, almost an affront to the very principles of aerial combat. It was a brute, a behemoth of an aircraft, weighing in at nearly 7 tons fully loaded, a staggering figure for a single-engine fighter. Its barrel-shaped fuselage, necessitated by the massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, seemed disproportionately large, topped by a bulbous greenhouse canopy. Its wings, though broad, appeared almost too small to lift such a colossal frame, and its propeller dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe's inventory. German pilots, accustomed to the sleek, almost delicate lines of British Spitfires or their own nimble designs, found the P-47's appearance almost comical. They saw a machine that struggled for altitude, lumbering upwards in tight formations, its powerful engine straining audibly. Flying milk bottles? They scoffed, a nickname born of derision and a profound underestimation. They believed the Americans, with their industrial might, had simply built a bigger, heavier version of a fighter, misunderstanding the fundamental requirements of dogfighting. Their own success had taught them that agility, climb rate, and the ability to outturn an opponent were paramount. The P-47, with its apparent lack of these qualities, seemed like an easy target, a testament to American naivete in the art of air warfare. This conviction was further cemented by their initial combat reports, which often highlighted the Thunderbolt's perceived clumsiness at medium altitudes. They were confident, almost arrogant, in their tactical brilliance and the proven superiority of their own aircraft. They were looking for a European fighter, and what they saw was a clumsy, oversized American one, a mistake they believed would be easily exploited. They could not have been more wrong. The panic of June 1940, as the Wehrmacht rolled through France, sent shockwaves across the Atlantic. The U.S. Army Air Corps, witnessing the devastating effectiveness of the Luftwaffe, issued an urgent call for a new high-altitude interceptor, one capable of matching Germany's finest. Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, Alexander Kartveli, answered that call. But what he conceived was not a sleek, agile dogfighter in the European mold. It will be a dinosaur, Kartveli reportedly admitted to his design team. But it will be a dinosaur with good proportions. This dinosaur was the XP-47B prototype, and when it first flew on May 6, 1941, it shocked everyone who saw it. At an empty weight of 9,900 pounds, it was a staggering 65% heavier than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. Its most distinctive feature, the massive turbo supercharger system, required complex ducting that ran through the entire rear fuselage, giving it an almost pregnant appearance. Test pilots, approaching this colossal machine for the first time, invariably asked the same question, a mix of awe and disbelief in their voices. This thing actually flies? Indeed, it flew, but its early days were fraught with challenges. Major Hubert "Hub" Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group training at Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially despised the aircraft. Between September 1942 and January 1943, his unit lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training accidents. The P-47, in its infancy, tragically killed more Americans in training than Germans would in the first months of combat. It was a beast to handle, prone to ground loops on landing, torque rolls on takeoff, and diving with such enthusiasm that pilots discovered compressibility where their controls would freeze as shock waves formed on the wings. It was clumsy, unforgiving, and seemed to confirm every prejudice held by those who favored lighter, more agile designs. Yet, amidst this struggle, a seed of transformation was quietly taking root. Those who persevered and mastered the P-47 began to discover something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma who would later become one of America's top aces, vividly described his first flight. It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it. This wasn't a fighter built for balletic turns. It was a blunt instrument of raw power. The initial combat encounters in April and May 1943, however, seemed only to reinforce German preconceptions. P-47 seconds struggled to turn with the Focke-Wulf 190 seconds, couldn't climb with the Messerschmitt 109 seconds, and lacked their nimble handling at medium altitudes. Josef Pips Priller, the commanding officer of Jagdgeschwader 26, famously reported to headquarters after his first encounter, "The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. Our boys are calling them Indianas, fat targets pretending to be warriors." The statistics appeared to confirm this German confidence. In their first month of operations, American fighter groups lost 14 Thunderbolts for only 3 confirmed German kills. Even the RAF, observing from their Spitfire squadrons, quietly suggested the Americans might reconsider their choice of mount, with British pilots joking that the best evasive maneuver in a P-47 was to unstrap and run around the roomy cockpit. But something strange, something profoundly significant, was happening in those early encounters that German intelligence, blinded by their initial derision, failed to notice. The P-47 seconds that were shot down had absorbed an incredible, almost unbelievable amount of punishment before falling. One aircraft, returning from a May 4th mission, bore 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have utterly disintegrated a Messerschmitt or a Spitfire. Its massive radial engine, lacking vulnerable coolant systems, shrugged off hits that would have stopped a liquid-cooled fighter cold. This was the first subtle hint that the flying milk bottle was not what it seemed, that its true nature lay not in agility, but in an unprecedented, almost defiant resilience. The initial combat encounters in April and May of 1943 seemed, at first glance, to confirm every German prejudice. The P-47 seconds, lumbering and heavy, simply could not turn with the agile Focke-Wulf 190 seconds, nor could they match the climb rates of the nimble Messerschmitt Bf 109 seconds at medium altitudes. Luftwaffe pilots, veterans of years of continuous warfare, quickly developed tactics to exploit these perceived weaknesses. They would attack from below, where the heavy Thunderbolts struggled to maneuver, or force turning fights where agility was paramount, confident that their lighter, more responsive machines held the decisive advantage. Josef Pips Priller, the commanding officer of Jagdgeschwader 26, famously dismissed the new American fighter as meat for the slaughter, declaring it flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. The statistics of those early months appeared to bear him out. American fighter groups lost 14 Thunderbolts for a mere 3 confirmed German kills in their first month of operations. Even the seasoned pilots of the Royal Air Force, observing from their Spitfire squadrons, quietly suggested the Americans might reconsider their choice of mount. Their jokes about running around the P-47's roomy cockpit in an evasive maneuver highlighting the widespread derision. Yet, beneath this surface of apparent clumsiness and vulnerability, a profound, almost defiant, strength was beginning to reveal itself. German intelligence, focused on traditional performance metrics, failed to grasp a crucial, terrifying detail. The P-47 seconds that were shot down had absorbed an incredible, almost unbelievable amount of punishment before succumbing. One aircraft, returning from a May 4th mission, bore the scars of 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have utterly disintegrated any conventional Messerschmitt or Spitfire. The Thunderbolt's massive radial engine, lacking the vulnerable coolant systems of liquid-cooled fighters, shrugged off hits that would have instantly stopped other aircraft cold. This was no fragile, nimble dancer of the skies. It was a flying tank, a testament to brute force engineering. More significantly, when the P-47 seconds did manage to bring their formidable armament to bear, the results were catastrophic. Unlike the rifle-caliber weapons of early warfighters or the limited ammunition of German cannons, the American fighter carried a devastating battery of 8 50-caliber Browning machine guns. With a combined rate of fire exceeding 6,000 rounds per minute and a staggering 3,400 rounds of ammunition, a Thunderbolt could maintain sustained fire for over 30 seconds, an eternity in the fleeting moments of aerial combat. This concentrated firepower created a convergence zone of destruction that German pilots had simply never experienced. Aircraft caught in this torrent of heavy bullets didn't just fall, they often disintegrated, torn apart by the sheer volume of lead. The event that would irrevocably begin to change German perceptions occurred on June 26, 1943, high above Lazo, France. It involved Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron, and an encounter that would become legendary on both sides of the conflict. Johnson's formation of 48 P-47 seconds was returning from escort duty when they were ambushed by 16 Focke-Wulf 190 seconds from Dachshund. Jagdgeschwader 26, led by Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, the younger brother of the famous Adolf Galland. The Germans executed a perfect attack, diving from the sun with an overwhelming speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, flying at the rear of the formation, was caught in the crossfire of multiple attackers, taking catastrophic damage in the first seconds of combat. 21 20mm cannon shells exploded across his aircraft. The canopy shattered. Hydraulic fluid sprayed into the cockpit. The engine cowling was torn away, and fire erupted behind the instrument panel. Johnson, wounded in the nose and leg by shrapnel and bullet fragments, tried to bail out, but discovered the canopy was jammed shut, a 20mm shell having exploded in its track, welding it in place. He was trapped in a dying aircraft at 27,000 feet. What happened next defied every assumption about combat damage tolerance. Despite having no forward visibility through the oil-covered windscreen, a barely functioning engine that shook violently, and controls that responded only intermittently, Johnson somehow managed to level the aircraft and point it toward England. The P-47, a testament to its overbuilt design, continued flying with damage that would have reduced any other fighter to falling debris. Then, it got worse. A lone Focke-Wulf 190, flown by an unknown pilot from Aiku, JG-26, discovered the crippled Thunderbolt limping toward the channel at less than 170 miles per hour. The German pilot positioned himself behind Johnson's P-47 and opened fire with his 4 20mm cannons and 2 13mm machine guns. Johnson, unable to evade, could only huddle behind his armor plate and pray. The Thunderbolt absorbed the entire cannon ammunition load. Then the German repositioned and fired again, this time with only his machine guns. His cannon ammunition exhausted, the German pilot pulled alongside, staring in disbelief at the flying wreck. Johnson could see his face clearly. Young, blond, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion to something approaching fear. The German repositioned and emptied his remaining machine gun ammunition into the Thunderbolt. Still, it flew. He pulled alongside again, shook his head in apparent amazement, gave an informal salute, and peeled away, presumably out of ammunition. Johnson's P-47 landed at Manston, its engine failing on the runway. The crew chief stopped counting bullet holes after reaching 200. One cannon shell had exploded inches from Johnson's head. Another had detonated against the armor plate behind his seat. The engine had taken direct hits, the control cables were partially severed, and 3 of the 4 main longerons, the structural backbone of the fuselage, were shot through. Yet, the aircraft had brought him home. The survival of Johnson's aircraft sent shockwaves through both air forces. American engineers studying the wreckage realized they had profoundly underestimated their own creation. German intelligence, receiving combat reports from Aiku, Jagdgeschwader 26, initially refused to believe it. No aircraft, they insisted, could absorb that much punishment. But testimony from multiple pilots confirmed the impossible. The Thunderbolt had taken everything the Luftwaffe's best fighter could deliver, and survived. By July 1943, American pilots were rapidly learning to exploit the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, the 56th Fighter Group commander, had discovered the secret through brutal trial and error, distilling it into a simple yet revolutionary doctrine. Don't turn with them. Don't climb with them at low altitude. Use your weight. Use your power. Use your guns. The Thunderbolt's massive weight, initially seen as its greatest disadvantage, was transformed into its most potent weapon. In a dive, nothing could catch it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could reach 550 miles per hour, faster than any German fighter could achieve, even in a vertical dive. This incredible speed could then be converted back into altitude in a zoom climb that left pursuing fighters helplessly behind. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin, who would become one of the first American aces in Europe, developed what became known as the boom and zoom tactic, though pilots often called it the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Instead of engaging in traditional dogfights, P-47 formations would climb to 30,000 feet and higher, altitudes where German fighters struggled to operate effectively. When Luftwaffe fighters appeared below, the Thunderbolts would roll inverted and dive, reaching speeds that made deflection shooting impossible for defending Germans. At the bottom of these dives, the American heavy machine guns would speak, unleashing their devastating wall of lead. German pilots who survived described it as facing a wall of lead, the combined firepower creating an impenetrable zone of destruction. Aircraft caught in this convergence pattern didn't just fall, they disintegrated, a terrifying revelation of the P-47's true destructive potential. The true, terrifying revelation of American firepower and the P-47's indomitable nature came into sharp focus during the dual raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg on August 17, 1943. This mission, the deepest penetration into Germany attempted to that date, was a crucible that demonstrated both the Thunderbolt's limitations in terms of range, even with external drop tanks, and its utterly devastating effectiveness when employed with its newfound tactical understanding. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, found himself in a desperate aerial ballet, encountering a formation of Messerschmitt Bf-110 destroyer aircraft, positioning to attack the vulnerable B-17 seconds. These twin-engine German fighters, heavily armed with cannons and rockets, were the Luftwaffe's specialized bomber killers, designed to tear apart heavy formations. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts, like avenging angels, rolled into their attack dive from a commanding 28,000 feet. Unteroffizier Hinrich Roth, a gunner in one of the Me-110 seconds, who miraculously survived the encounter, later recounted his horror in a post-capture interrogation. The American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. Good hits. I saw them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even wobble. Then he fired. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart, not shot down, destroyed. Wings separated from fuselage, tail severed, the crew compartment shredded into metal confetti. In 2 seconds, a 110 became nothing. The sheer, concentrated firepower was unlike anything the German pilots had ever experienced. 8 Messerschmitt 110 seconds were destroyed in less than a minute. Each P-47 carried 425 rounds per gun, totaling 3,400 rounds, weighing nearly 900 pounds. At the typical convergence distance of 300 yards, all 8 guns' ballistic paths intersected in a zone roughly 6 feet in diameter. Anything caught in that zone faced a torrent of 150-inch projectiles per second, each traveling at an astonishing 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition itself was a revelation of American industrial capacity. While German fighters struggled with limited cannon ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds for a 20mm weapon, American pilots could maintain sustained fire for over half a minute, an eternity in aerial combat. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who would become the top American ace in Europe with 28 victories, vividly described the effect. When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw a 109 literally cut in half, the tail falling one way, the nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what hit him. The flying milk bottle was now a flying shredder. By September 1943, The Luftwaffe was discovering another horrifying reality about the P-47. Its performance improved dramatically with altitude, while German fighters suffered. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine maintained its rated power output up to 30,000 feet, delivering sea-level performance in the thin stratosphere. German fighters, relying on single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers, saw their performance degrade significantly above 25,000 feet, gasping for air where the Thunderbolt thrived. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, encountered this reality fatally on October 8, 1943. Leading Jagdgeschwader, won against a B-17 formation at 28,000 feet over Bremen, Philipp found his Focke-Wulf 190A, 6 sluggish and unresponsive in the thin air. When P-47 seconds of the 56th Fighter Group dove on his formation from 32,000 feet, the German fighters were, quite literally, sitting ducks. Robert Johnson, now an experienced combat pilot on his way to ace status, was flying at 31,000 feet when he spotted Philipp's distinctive Focke-Wulf. Johnson's combat report was chillingly clinical. Open fire at 300 yards, 30 degrees deflection. Observed strikes along entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded. No parachute observed. Philipp's death sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their best, a man who had survived over 500 combat missions on both eastern and western fronts, couldn't survive against the Thunderbolts, what chance did average pilots have? The German High Command, now deeply alarmed, ordered an immediate investigation into the P-47's capabilities. The report delivered to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring in November 1943 was sobering, a stark contrast to the earlier derision. It detailed that the Thunderbolt's service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter could reach. Its dive speed approached the sound barrier, a terrifying, uncontrollable velocity for any propeller-driven aircraft of the era. Its armor included a 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, a 1/2-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflection plates around the engine. Most disturbingly, its rugged construction allowed it to absorb damage that would destroy 3 conventional fighters and still return home. The flying milk bottle was not just tough, it was virtually indestructible. In January 1944, a new variant of the P-47 began arriving in England that would complete the transformation from laughingstock to nightmare. The P-47D-22 featured a Hamilton Standard hydromatic propeller with paddle blades 13 feet in diameter, with broad chord blades that bit into the air like massive oars. The improvement in climb rate was immediate and dramatic. Where earlier Thunderbolts had climbed at an anemic 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, the paddle blade variants could achieve 3,000 feet per minute, matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. The massive propeller also improved acceleration, allowing P-47 seconds to build energy faster in level flight. Headman Heinz Nock of Jagdgeschwader 11, a veteran with over 200 combat missions, encountered the new variants in February 1944 during a bomber interception near Hanover. He wrote in his combat diary, a testament to the shifting tide. "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near Hanover, expecting our usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. When we tried to disengage, they followed us up to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." The paddle blade propeller did more than just improve performance. It changed the very sound of the Thunderbolt. The distinctive thundering roar, created by the blade tips reaching supersonic speeds, could be heard from miles away. German ground troops reported being able to identify approaching P-47 seconds by sound alone, a deep, threatening rumble that meant death from above. They began calling it Donnerschlag, thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47's, equipped with external fuel tanks, could escort bombers deep into Germany. The standard configuration carried two 108-gallon wing tanks or a 75-gallon belly tank, extending their range to over 1,000 miles. With the paddle blade propeller providing improved performance, even when loaded, Thunderbolts could fight on equal terms immediately after dropping tanks. The Luftwaffe's desperate response was to concentrate on the bombers, hoping to inflict enough losses to stop the American daylight campaign. But this required flying through the P-47 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal proposition. German pilots developed a grudging respect that bordered on fear for the big American fighters. Major Gunther Rall, one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, mostly on the Eastern Front, survived an encounter with P-47's on March 6, 1944, that left him badly wounded. He later recalled in a post-war interview, "The memory still vivid. We saw them above us, fat silhouettes against the sun." Someone laughed and said, "Here come the flying pigs." Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The first pass destroyed 3 of our fighters. Just gone, transformed into burning debris. Their guns didn't fire in bursts like ours. They poured out solid streams of fire. Getting caught in that stream meant instant death. The escort missions revealed another P-47 advantage: endurance. While German fighters operated at maximum power settings that consumed fuel rapidly, the big American radials could cruise efficiently at high altitude. Thunderbolts could remain with the bombers for hours, rotating top cover while maintaining enough fuel for combat and return. As more P-51 Mustangs arrived to take over long-range escort duties in spring 1944, P-47 units increasingly focused on ground attack, a role that would make them the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. The transition began in earnest in April 1944 as the Allies prepared for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's heavy machine gun battery proved equally effective against ground targets. The standard armor-piercing incendiary ammunition could penetrate the top armor of most German vehicles, while the sheer volume of fire could destroy soft targets in seconds. A 2-second burst put 160 half-inch projectiles into a target area the size of a truck. But it was the addition of bombs and rockets that transformed the P-47 into a true multi-role monster. The D-25 variant could carry 2 1,000-pound bombs under the wings and a 500-pounder under the fuselage, a bomb load equal to early war medium bombers. Later variants added zero-length rocket stubs for 105-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, each equivalent to a 105mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, experienced P-47 ground attacks firsthand, his words painting a picture of sheer terror. They came in low, so low you could see the pilots' faces. The sound was terrifying. Engines roaring, rockets screaming, then the hammer of those heavy machine guns. A column of our trucks simply ceased to exist. 20 vehicles transformed into burning wreckage in one pass. The psychological effect on the men was devastating. They called them jabos, fighter bombers. But these were something beyond that. They were flying artillery with the accuracy of snipers. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, the Luftwaffe discovered how completely the balance of power had shifted. Over 500 P-47's provided air cover for the invasion, creating an impenetrable umbrella over the beaches. German fighters attempting to reach the landing zones were massacred. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader II, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day, reported, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. The sky belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. We tried to break through at dawn, 12 fighters from our group. I was the only one to return. The P-47 seconds were waiting at every altitude. You couldn't climb over them, couldn't dive under them. Their guns turned our fighters into aluminum rain. In the weeks following D-Day, P-47 seconds systematically destroyed German movement in daylight. The statistics were staggering. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts claimed 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles, and 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. The Wehrmacht was forced to move only at night, severely hampering their ability to respond to Allied advances. The Germans tried everything to counter the Thunderbolt threat. Reinforced vehicle armor, more anti-aircraft guns, new camouflage techniques. Nothing worked. The P-47's combination of speed, armor, and firepower made them nearly unstoppable. Even the feared 88mm flak guns struggled to track the fast-moving fighters at low altitude. While devastating Europe, the P-47 was simultaneously proving its worth in the Pacific theater. The 348th Fighter Group, operating from New Guinea, discovered that the Thunderbolt's qualities were perfectly suited to the vast distances and harsh conditions of the Pacific War. Colonel Neil Kirby, commanding the 348th, developed tactics specifically for the Pacific. On October 11, 1943, Kirby led 4 P-47 seconds against 40 Japanese aircraft over Wewak, shooting down 6 enemy planes himself in a single mission, earning him the Medal of Honor. The Japanese, accustomed to fighting nimble but fragile American fighters, were unprepared for the P-47's combination of firepower and durability. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, who encountered P-47 seconds over New Guinea, later wrote, "We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannon, which could destroy a P-40 with a few hits, seemed to have no effect. I put dozens of rounds into one Thunderbolt and watched it fly away. Their return fire was terrifying. Streams of heavy bullets that tore aircraft apart. The P-47 Newtons, developed specifically for the Pacific, featured increased fuel capacity with wet wings holding 93 gallons each, extending range to 2,350 miles. This variant would escort B-29 seconds to Japan, proving that the short-legged fighter of 1943 had evolved into a true long-range weapon. Perhaps the ultimate vindication of the P-47's evolution came in its encounters with German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me-262, with its 540 miles per hour's top speed, should have been untouchable by propeller-driven fighters. But Thunderbolt pilots discovered they could catch jets in 2 situations: during takeoff and landing, when jets were most vulnerable, and in high-speed dives from altitude. On November 27, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Meyer of the 352nd Fighter Group became one of the first pilots to shoot down an Me-262 with a P-47. Diving from 28,000 feet, Meyer's Thunderbolt reached speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, fast enough to catch the jet in level flight. The jet pilot, confident in his speed advantage, never saw the diving P-47 until Meyer's guns opened up at 400 yards. Meyer's combat report noted, "The enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large pieces, including both engines, separated from the fuselage. The pilot did not escape. The concentrated fire of 8 50 caliber guns proved more effective than we anticipated against jet aircraft." By early 1945, specialized P-47M variants were deployed specifically to counter German jets and V-1 flying bombs. With water methanol injection boosting power to 2,800 horsepower and refined aerodynamics, these ultimate Thunderbolts could reach 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, fast enough to intercept even jets under certain conditions. Major George Bostwick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron, equipped with P-47's, shot down two Mi 262 seconds in March 1945. His tactical report emphasized firepower over speed. The jets are faster, but they can't turn and they can't take punishment. One good burst from our battery, and they come apart like they're made of paper. They have to slow down to attack bombers. That's when we get them. The ultimate, brutal demonstration of American industrial might and the P-47's overwhelming superiority came during Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe's desperate, last-gasp attempt to destroy Allied air power on January 1st, 1945. Nearly 900 German fighters, including their best remaining pilots, launched surprise attacks on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At Y-34 airfield near Metz, home to the 365th Fighter Group's P-47's, the attack initially succeeded. German fighters destroyed 22 Thunderbolts on the ground, along with several other aircraft. A captured German pilot, brought to the command post, pointed at the burning aircraft and taunted, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking's response became legendary throughout the 9th Air Force, a chilling prophecy of the inevitable. He pointed to the flight line where ground crews were already pushing damaged aircraft aside and preparing hard stands for replacements. "By tomorrow, we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German pilot's smirk disappeared. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47D 42nd filled the flight line, flown in from depots in England. The Luftwaffe lost 271 aircraft and 213 pilots in Bodenplatte, including many irreplaceable instructors and squadron leaders. These losses they could never replace. The Americans lost 134 aircraft total across all attacked airfields, all replaced within a week. The numbers told the story of inevitable defeat, a stark, terrifying revelation of a war of attrition Germany could never win. The devastating revelations of the P-47's true capabilities, culminating in the brutal efficiency of Operation Bodenplatte, forced a painful and undeniable shift in the Luftwaffe's perception. The laughter and derision that had greeted the flying milk bottle in 1943 had long since evaporated, replaced by a chilling dread. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, former head of the Luftwaffe fighter arm, would later reflect on this profound misjudgment, stating, "We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We saw this big, heavy fighter and laughed. The Americans don't understand air combat, we said. They built a bomber and called it a fighter. We were the ones who didn't understand." This was the bitter realization. The Germans had been fighting a war based on one set of rules, only to discover their adversary had rewritten the entire playbook. The consequences of this miscalculation were immediate and catastrophic. The Luftwaffe, once the undisputed master of the skies, found itself systematically dismantled. The sheer scale of American industrial output, epitomized by the P-47, became a psychological weapon as potent as its 50 caliber guns. Republic Aviation alone produced an astonishing 15,683 P-47's during the war, more than any other American fighter. At its peak, the Farmingdale factory on Long Island completed one Thunderbolt every hour, around the clock. The Evansville plant in Indiana, built from empty farmland in 1942, was churning out 500 aircraft per month by 1944. Each P-47D, a complex machine requiring 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber, was assembled with precision by American workers, many of them women who had never seen an aircraft before Pearl Harbor. This industrial might extended to every facet of the war effort. Ammunition production was equally staggering. With hundreds of Thunderbolts flying daily missions, consumption exceeded 10 million rounds per month by mid-1944. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, just one of several plants, produced 30 million rounds monthly. The fuel consumption was enormous, with the 9th Air Force alone consuming over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly by late 1944, all shipped across the Atlantic in tankers that were themselves products of American mass production. Even more critical than the machines was the human element. By 1944, the United States was graduating 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training, a number greater than Germany had trained in the entire war. Each P-47 pilot received a minimum of 400 hours of flight training before entering combat, including 100 hours in advanced fighters. German pilots, by stark contrast, were entering combat with less than 100 hours total time by war's end, some with barely 30 hours. The quality of American training was evident. Pilots arrived in Europe proficient in formation flying, instrument navigation, gunnery, and tactics. They had practiced against captured German aircraft, understanding their enemy's capabilities and limitations. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, arriving in England in September 1944, exemplified this advantage. I had 420 hours in my logbook, including 75 hours in the P-47. I'd fired at towed targets, practiced deflection shooting, studied gun camera, film from actual combat. My first mission, I knew exactly what to do. The German pilot I faced couldn't have had half my experience. It wasn't even a fair fight. The psychological impact on the German forces was devastating. Joseph Pips Priller, the same pilot who had mocked the P-47 seconds as pregnant cows 2 years earlier, was interviewed by German propaganda officials in March 1945. His statement, deemed too demoralizing for publication, revealed the complete transformation in German attitudes. The Thunderbolt is the best fighter-bomber ever built. Its firepower is unprecedented. Weapons that never jam, never overheat, never run out of ammunition in normal combat. It carries bombs like a medium bomber, fires rockets like artillery, and fights like a fighter when needed. But beyond the machine is what it represents: unlimited American production. They lose 10, they build 20. We lose 1, it's gone forever. Their pilots arrive better trained than our instructors. They have fuel for training, ammunition for practice, spare parts for everything. We have nothing but courage, and courage without resources is just delayed defeat. We laughed at them in 1943. We're not laughing now. When you hear those guns, you know death has come calling. The sound haunts us. Mechanical, precise, unstoppable. Like everything American, it's about overwhelming material superiority. They didn't beat us through better tactics or braver pilots. They buried us under an avalanche of steel and lead. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe existed largely on paper. Fuel shortages grounded most aircraft. Experienced pilots were dead or captured. Airfields were cratered ruins. But even with aircraft and fuel, German pilots faced an impossible equation. Attacking meant facing P-47 formations that owned every altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Bretschneider, one of the last German pilots trained in 1945, flew exactly one combat mission before the war ended. His encounter with P-47 seconds over Leipzig lasted 12 seconds. I saw them diving from above, 4 Thunderbolts in perfect formation. I tried to turn, but they were too fast. The leader fired from 500 meters. My aircraft shook like it was hit by sledgehammers. The engine exploded. The wings separated. I barely escaped. In the parachute, I watched them destroy my entire staffel. 6 fighters gone in under a minute. The sky rained, burning aluminum and bodies. The psychological impact was complete. German medical officers began to diagnose Jabo fever, physical symptoms of stress, appearing whenever Thunderbolts were reported in the area. Veterans who had faced Spitfires and Hurricanes without fear became physically ill before missions against P-47 seconds. The distinctive thunder of approaching Thunderbolts caused panic among ground troops, who knew that survival meant finding cover immediately. The final statistics of P-47 operations defied comprehension and underscored the devastating consequences of underestimating American industrial and tactical innovation. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft were destroyed in aerial combat, with another 3,315 destroyed on the ground. The ground attack roll saw 86,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored fighting vehicles, 68,000 trucks, and 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. In the Pacific, 697 Japanese aircraft were destroyed in aerial combat, 150 on the ground, along with 1,500 vehicles, 150 locomotives, and countless barges, ships, and installations. The 9th Air Force alone, primarily equipped with P-47 seconds, flew 213,873 combat sorties, dropped 120,000 tons of bombs, fired 135 million rounds of ammunition, and launched 60,000 rockets. Thunderbolt units achieved a remarkable 4:6 kill ratio in aerial combat, while maintaining the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter bomber. Behind these staggering numbers lay the human cost. The Luftwaffe lost approximately 28,000 pilots killed in combat against Western Allied forces, many falling to the concentrated fire of American heavy machine guns. Each loss represented years of training that Germany could never replace. By war's end, the average German fighter pilot had less than 30 hours of combat experience, while the average P-47 pilot had over 200. The captured German intelligence reports from the Luftwaffe Interrogation Center at Oberursel, continuously updated throughout the war, showed a complete reversal of opinion. From minimal threat in April 1943 to critical threat at all altitudes by June 1944, and finally, in March 1945, unsurvivable in direct engagement. The flying milk bottle had not just defeated the Luftwaffe, it had utterly destroyed it, leaving behind a legacy of terror and a painful, undeniable truth. The saga of the P-47 Thunderbolt, from a derided flying milk bottle to the Luftwaffe's ultimate terror, transcends a mere tale of technological evolution. It stands as a profound historical testament to the clash of philosophies, the power of industrial might, and the critical importance of adaptation in the crucible of total war. This was not just a story of one aircraft, it was a microcosm of the entire conflict, revealing the fundamental differences in how the warring powers approached the ultimate test of nations. At its heart, the P-47's triumph was a victory of industrial logic over tactical brilliance, of overwhelming material superiority over individual finesse. German engineers, steeped in a tradition of precision and elegant design, sought to create the most agile, technically advanced interceptors, believing that superior maneuverability and pilot skill would always prevail. They built fighters for duels, for the ballet of the dogfight. The Americans, however, embraced a different ethos. Faced with the daunting task of fighting a two-ocean war, they designed the P-47 around principles of mass production, brute force engineering, and, crucially, survivability and devastating firepower. As General Galland himself admitted, the Americans didn't try to build a European fighter. They built an American one designed around production, firepower, and survivability. They understood that in a war of attrition, the plane that could take punishment and deliver devastating firepower would win. They were right. This realization offers a vital lesson. In modern warfare, the ability to produce, sustain, and replace resources often outweighs the initial technical superiority of a single weapon system. The P-47, with its overbuilt components, its robust radial engine, and its unparalleled armament, was a physical manifestation of America's boundless industrial capacity. While German factories struggled under relentless bombing and resource shortages, churning out fewer, more complex aircraft, American assembly lines delivered Thunderbolts by the thousands, each one a testament to a nation mobilized for total victory. This wasn't just about building planes. It was about building an entire ecosystem of war, from the vast quantities of fuel and ammunition to the sophisticated training programs that produced pilots far more experienced than their German counterparts. The Roosevelt's piano, the sound of 8 synchronized 50-caliber machine guns, became the terrifying symphony of this industrial dominance. Furthermore, the P-47's journey underscores the enduring lesson of adaptation. What began as a clumsy, misunderstood design was transformed through relentless trial and error, through the ingenuity of pilots like Zemke and Mahurin, who developed the boom and zoom tactics. They didn't try to make the P-47 something it wasn't. They embraced its inherent strengths: speed in a dive, altitude performance, and sheer destructive power, and forged a new way of fighting. This adaptability, the willingness to discard outdated doctrines and innovate under pressure, proved to be a decisive factor. It showed that even a seemingly flawed design, when understood and utilized correctly, could become an unstoppable force. The long-term impact of the P-47 on aerial warfare was profound. It helped usher in an era where speed, altitude performance, and overwhelming firepower became paramount, laying the groundwork for future generations of heavy, powerful jet fighters. The emphasis shifted from nimble dogfighting to energy management and devastating, high-speed passes. The P-47, alongside the P-51 Mustang, fundamentally broke the Luftwaffe's back, clearing the skies for Allied bombers and ultimately enabling the ground invasion of Europe. Its role in destroying German ground transportation and morale was equally critical, demonstrating the devastating effectiveness of close air support and fighter-bomber operations. The P-47's legacy is also a stark reminder of the human cost of war and the psychological toll it exacts. The Jabo fever among German pilots, the despair in Priller's final assessment, and the chilling accounts of pilots like Brettschneider facing an impossible aerial equation, all speak to the crushing weight of overwhelming material superiority. It wasn't just the machines that were broken, it was the spirit of an entire air force, confronted with an enemy that could replace losses faster than they could inflict them, and whose pilots arrived better trained than their own instructors. In essence, the P-47 Thunderbolt stands as a powerful symbol of the American way of war in World War II, a pragmatic, robust, and ultimately overwhelming approach that prioritized durability, firepower, and mass production. It taught the world that in a total war, the ability to outproduce, outtrain, and outlast the enemy could be more decisive than any single tactical advantage. The laughter that greeted its arrival quickly turned to terror, and in that transformation lies a timeless lesson about the dangers of underestimating an adversary and the unstoppable force of a nation fully committed to victory. The P-47 Thunderbolt, once dismissed as a clumsy flying milk bottle, emerged from the crucible of World War II, not just as a formidable fighter, but as a symbol of an unstoppable industrial and strategic philosophy. Its thunderous roar, initially a sound of curiosity, became the terrifying harbinger of an avalanche of steel and lead that buried the Luftwaffe and redefined aerial combat. From derision to dread, its journey encapsulates a pivotal lesson. Never underestimate the power of brute force engineering, overwhelming resources, and the relentless will to adapt and overcome. If this journey from mockery to terror captivated you, hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel for more untold stories of history, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What other historical transformations have left you in awe?